Some leaders leave footprints, others leave libraries. You're tuning into the Authors on Mission podcast, where industry giants become literacy legends. In every episode, we talk with authors who turn their brilliance into books that transform lives. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authors on Mission. Welcome to your authorship experience. Hello and welcome to Authors on Mission, the podcast committed to bringing you top-tier insights and strategies from established experts who've achieved success in their fields and wrote about it. I'm your host, Danielle Hutchinson, Chief Creative Officer here at Authors on Mission. And today I'm thrilled to welcome Brian Gorman, a transformational coach and change expert with over 5 decades of experience guiding individuals and organizations through significant transitions. Brian is the founder of transforminglives.coach and the author of the opening chapter of the wonderful book, Personal, Educational, and Organizational Transformation, Leading During the Times of Meta Crisis. The chapter is The Hero and the Sherpa, Your Guide Through Life's Challenges, which presents Brian's framework called the Universal Change Journey. We're going to dive all into that in just a moment, but without further ado, I would love to introduce our guest. Brian, welcome to the show.
Danielle, thank you so much. I am excited to be here.
Yeah, it's quite a pleasure. And, to all of our listeners today, funny enough, Brian and I are actually neighbors. We live about an hour apart, which I always think is really funny because at any given moment in this podcasting world, you could be talking to somebody who's across, the country, in a whole completely different country. But here we are, just an hour's drive down the turnpike. So it's just really funny to think about. But hey, Brian, I would love for you, if you don't mind, giving us a little bit more of an insight of your background. What brought you to writing this incredible chapter to the book, and what kind of inspired that journey?
I'm now 75. When I turned 65, I made a commitment to do everything I could to share back out to the world all that I have learned from many, many fabulous teachers. And The Hero and the Sherpa is really a culmination of my decades of work in organizational change management, my now at that point about 7 or 8 years of individual coaching, and really drawing all of what I had learned through those experiences into a single chapter that people could use to guide themselves or guide others through change.
Understood. Got it. So, this actually started a while back then, but of course, at that age, you've already experienced so many different things. And I've described a little bit about these experiences you've been through, primarily your coaching work. What other steps did you take in your journey besides the coaching that kind of led you to this? I know you described you've had some military training, AIDS activism, corporate consulting. Can you give us a little bit more insight on those and how those experiences really just informed your approach to change management?
I'm going to have to fly because there's a lot of years there. And I actually...
Yeah, the short version.
I actually, Danielle, want to fly all the way back to my freshman year in college, which is where the seed was planted. When I got to Syracuse University, it was 1967. I was an introverted Eagle Scout. I had grown up in an all-white suburb of New York City. And I decided that I wanted to change my persona. So I joined Alpha Phi Omega, which is a national service fraternity. So I went fraternity, but not to fraternity. And I volunteered to help form a Boy Scout troop on the nearby Onondaga Reservation. I soon learned that the university's portrayal of their mascot, which was a Native American mascot at the time, was xenophobic and racist. It was Caucasian fraternity brothers dressed up like Hollywood Indians running around like they were drunk. And I tried for my entire undergraduate time at Syracuse to convince the university to change its mascot, or perhaps to offer a scholarship to a qualified Native American student to portray the mascot more legitimately. No change. But it really sparked this commitment to addressing things that aren't working. addressing things that aren't right. And that really has been at the heart of my change journey ever since. So, and I will start to fly in just a moment, but coming out of undergraduate school, I enrolled in grad school. I got drafted and I ended up spending 4 years as a drill sergeant. And as a drill sergeant, every 6 weeks, we had 48 new trainees, and our job was to create a functioning organization. Went through a number of other jobs, and in the late 80s, I was a management consultant and had the opportunity to train under Darrell Connor. Darrell is recognized as one of the founders of the profession of organizational change management. And I learned what I had been doing for the last 15 or 20 years actually had a profession and a science behind it. And spent both internally and externally working in that realm for another couple of decades almost. And at some point got tired of being on the road and living in hotels and airports. And one of the things I had learned is that organizations don't actually change. It's people that change. And organizational change management, when executed properly, is individual change at scale. So the journey that is defined in the Hero and the Sherpa is the same journey that I was part of a team of many consultants that took Merck through a global transformation in the early 2000s.
Great. Okay. So first off, you really had a lot of different experiences, like we mentioned. I like how you kept using the metaphor of, flying as we were going through these different stages here. But yeah, going from, the college, the drill sergeant work, that's a lot. And you really have inspired change in every one of these endeavors you've been in. And, as I was reading through the chapter that we're discussing today, you do mention how a lot of change also has to come from storytelling. I didn't realize that's something that seems to be a pretty important first step, for example, in your writing. So can you explain why you think storytelling is so powerful in the change process?
I used to ask this question directly, and now I preface it by saying this is a trick question. And the question I will ask is, are you a good storyteller? So many people think they're not. And the truth is, we are all incredible storytellers. We are telling ourselves stories all the time. We believe those stories, they become the truths, and they become the facts that guide our lives. There's neuroscience behind story, and I'm sure you've had other authors on the podcast that have talked about this, but it's worth repeating. We had story before we had language. We drew them in the dirt. We drew them on cave walls and hides. The human brain is a story processor. It is not a logic processor. The brain cannot tell the difference between a well-crafted story and a lived event. And so where I begin my change journeys with my clients is to craft that story, but it's not the story about the future. The story about the future is a head story. It's a story from the future. It's a head, heart, gut story. And why that's important, another piece of neuroscience, we have the same motor neurons, sensory neurons, electrochemical activity in our hearts as we do in our heads. We have about as many neurons in our guts as a cat brain. And each of these brains, some neuroscientists will call them neural networks or neural clusters, others will call them brains, but they all agree on the facts. Each of them has a specific function. Our heart is the seat of passion, compassion, and values. We know that. They broke my heart. His heart's not in the work that he's doing. Our guts are the seat of self-protection, who we are at our core, and courage. I found it in my gut to stand up to the bully. So we've known this for a long time, but there's a neuroscience about it. So very quickly, a client of mine lost her job during the housing collapse.
Mm.
She and her husband were in their mid-50s, second marriage for both. They owned 2 houses. They decided they wanted to retire to Costa Rica. So the head story is within the next 5 years, during a housing crisis, we have to sell 2 homes. We have to learn Spanish. We have to dispose of most of our property. We have to figure out how we're going to maintain a relationship with our children and grandchildren. That story sounds like maybe we should move to Florida. The story from the future is, I can't believe we did it. We woke up this morning in a new home in Costa Rica. The ocean breeze is blowing through the windows. We can hear the chatter of Spanish in the street. We had to sell 2 houses during the middle of the housing crisis, et cetera, et cetera. That story builds new neural networks. Again, the brain doesn't know the difference. Visit that story and visit that story and visit that story. And when you run into those obstacles, your brain says, I know what it's like on the other side because I've been there. There's a way under, around, or through these obstacles. So that's why I start with story.
Yeah, and I think it's really powerful because, especially in the writing world too, stories are just a huge, aspect in the audience's attention, keeping them engaged, relating to them, as you say. And I really do like the science that you threw in there, the amount of neurons and everything, because as much as I talk all the time on this podcast about the importance of storytelling and making those authentic connections with your readers, I never do quite dabble in the science behind it. So now I have a little bit of knowledge there I could pass along to others too. It's great to know that it really is grounded in that research. It's not just us liking a fun story. It's ingrained in our genetics.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's just really interesting to think about. So, and I'm assuming this is also something that you teach extensively in your workshops and your consulting as well. So I'm wondering if you can, perhaps share a little bit of a sneak peek. Is there any types of practices or exercises that if somebody wants to get more in touch with their storytelling side, for example, do you offer any sort of guidance for that?
I do.
Not to spoil any surprises.
No. It really becomes, as you were saying, to get in touch with yourself. And we each have our own ways of doing that, whether it be meditation, whether it be journaling, whether it be walks in nature. But to really get in touch with what makes your heart sing. What gives you joy in a way that time and everything else disappears? And when you can get into that space, and I tell my clients, write in your language, and that may be a verbal language, it may be music, it may be dance, it may be art, it may be sculpture. I've had stories from the future that are beautiful music without a single word. But once you get that story humming, the sky's the limit.
Right, I like that a lot. The sky is the limit. As soon as you, get some practice and refined your approaches, there's no limit to what you can do with those stories. Like you said, I think that's really powerful.
The other thing that, just from a technical perspective, took me a long time to learn was just write it. Then you can go back and you can worry about the grammar and you can worry about the redundancy of words and the punctuation and all that stuff. But that creative and that formal structure, if you will, are again drawing from 2 different parts of our brains. And so just work them one at a time.
Yeah, just one at a time. That's all it is one small step, right? And that is a tip that we do hear pretty often, just get writing, just do it. I mean, because at the end of the day, you're right. That's all we can do is put our practice in and refine it bit by bit. And, I guess that's a little bit like what you talk about in the hero and the Sherpa, in a way. I wonder, just trying to frame it back into that a little bit. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit more about that particular chapter with our audience today. what inspired you to frame transformation through the lens of the hero and the Sherpa?
Joseph Campbell.
Okay. So
And yeah, for our listeners who don't know Campbell or Campbell's
yeah, I was going to
work,
ask that because I'm not quite sure if I'm 100%, informed myself. So if you don't mind, please.
no problem. Campbell was a mythologist and psychologist in the mid 20th century.
Okay.
And one of the things he researched is there a pattern in creation myths across cultures and across time? Is there a pattern in coming of age myths across cultures and across times and so forth? And what he discovered was a single pattern in all myths. And all myths are about some form of creation, some form of transformation. And so he called the pattern the hero's journey. And we all know the hero's journey.
Yes.
For a few reasons. One, we have been on that journey many times ourselves, even though we may not be aware of it. And two, if we ever saw a Star Wars movie, if we ever read a good, well-written novel or saw a well-crafted play, they are all built on the framework of the hero's journey. And what I had discovered, one of the many things I discovered through my decades of organizational change work, is that's the journey that we are taking organizations through in the change management process. It's the same journey that I take my clients through in their own personal transformations.
Understood. I like that background you gave us. And you're right. I mean, we do all know the hero's journey. I guess I wasn't sure who exactly coined it, being that it's been used so many times in so many different contexts. But I do see how it does relate to this whole powerful storytelling aspect that we've been discussing today. I mean, in a way, by telling a story to your readers or to whoever it might be that you're speaking to, you're guiding them through their own journey of understanding. I can see how that.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of the things, and I honestly don't know if I'm quoting or paraphrasing Campbell, but he said, while we approach each change as if it's unique and unpredictable, it's not. We're taking the same journey over and over and over again. The catalyst may be different. The obstacles we encounter may be different, but the path through, the journey, it remains constant.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And, that path, that circle, that hero's journey itself, it's something that's, timeless, like you said, and it guides us to where we have to be, regardless of what that might be. I'd love to transition now into a little bit about your writing process. All of our listeners today are aspiring writers or already have books out too. And, it's always great to hear a little bit about other people's processes. One thing I saw when I was looking through your materials is you mentioned as a quiet person, writing's been a way of expressing yourself. So I wonder, how has your writing process evolved over your many years of experience?
So before we go there, I want to throw in one more tip.
Yeah, go ahead.
That I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Deaver.
Okay.
And those of you who know Jeffrey Deaver,
an American crime writer, correct?
He is probably most well known for The Bone Collector, which was a movie several years ago, but that's the genre of his writing. And when he came out with his first book of short stories, he said, when you're writing fiction novel, you can take it anywhere you want to go. And you have to end where your readers want it to end, or they're not going to come back again. But if you're writing short stories, you can end it any way that you want. So I highly recommend to your listeners, pick up a book of Jeffrey Deaver's short stories, because they have such incredible, brilliant twists that your readers will come back over and over again to see how your next short story is going to end. As a quiet person, and that's a recent label. That's a recent label. I just did a podcast myself with the author of The Power of Quiet People, and I feel much more comfortable talking about myself as a quiet person than an introvert. As a quiet person, writing was always a form of expression for me. So even in high school, I would write poetry, or I thought it was poetry, and write short stories and essays and so forth. And for many years, it was a struggle for me, in part because I was doing what I said don't do before, trying to do both the technical and the creative at the same time. But over the years, it has gotten to the point where I can sit down and create a 250, a 500, a 1,000 word piece with one sitting, with no trouble at all. And it is, for me, what is the heart of the message I want to communicate? And then just start talking that out through my fingertips.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I see how, your process is detailed like that. And it really does involve what you were just mentioning about all of that. And even if you are a quiet person to it, it's a matter of getting those thoughts onto the page as well, I would say, right? You don't need to be loud or confident or talking. It's about getting your brain and those messages in your brain onto the page.
And again, for me, it's about being present in the moment when I'm doing that. So I do block time on my calendar.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I am much more creative in the morning, so I block morning time. Learning those habits about yourself. When do your creative juices flow? That's when you want to be writing.
Yeah, because we all have that circadian rhythm, right? You need to figure out what does work best for you in your lifestyle. I personally am more of a night owl myself, but everybody does have that different, time to shine in their brains. I do agree with that for sure. How did you know that you were the morning person writer?
Just experience.
Just
experience.
Trial and error.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time on an earlier website, for 120 some weeks, I posted a 1,000-word article every week.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes I would start writing in the morning, sometimes I would start writing in the afternoon. And just, again, observing yourself, I realized when I started writing in the afternoon, I really struggled. And so shift that to the morning, where the writing came more easily. And that's how you learn.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, even with the writing process, like you said, I mean, it's all about that trial and error and figuring out what works best for you at the time of day, being about your writing style, being about what your strengths are as a writer and what you need to improve on too. It's all about just giving it that practice, and same with storytelling, which is, one of our main topics that we're talking about today. A lot of things that I'm realizing about your writing is that you do balance sharing personal stories and also providing practical guidance. So, do you have a strategy for balancing this personal versus the practical guidance? Or is there any certain formula that you follow, or is it a matter of trial and error again?
For me, it's actually, I think, more a matter of principle.
Okay.
Am I sharing this story because there's a lesson for the reader to learn from it? Or am I sharing this story to feed my ego? And if it's to feed my ego, it doesn't belong there. If there is a lesson in it around whatever the message is I'm trying to communicate, then it does.
Understood. Right. So you kind of have to read it back and ask yourself, what will the reader actually get from this piece? Is it practical? Will they see benefit from it? Or again, is it, more about yourself and just because you want to tell that story too? One tip I always give to my clients who then come to me because I'm an editor and a ghostwriter as well, you don't want to write something if it doesn't give value to your reader. A lot of people fall into the shorthand, especially with nonfiction books, of just talking about their experiences, their successes, and trying to, boost themselves up for credibility. But at the end of the day, you need to think about, what is it teaching my readers, my audience? How does it relate to them?
Daniel, thank you. The other important piece of that is my experience applicable on a universal basis? Or is this my experience that probably nobody else will ever have in the same way?
Understood. Right. Yes, you have to figure out if it's unique enough, if it's something that, everybody already heard that story, or if it's something that is relatable, but just different enough to give people some insight. Is that what you're getting at?
Somewhat. And I'll give you an example.
Please.
In The Hero and the Sherpa, I talk about Superstorm Sandy and how I was stuck in my apartment for 2 days, and about the impact of the superstorm on sailboats that were anchored on the northern inlet of Hoboken. That story isn't about me. It's about the metaphor that I created coming out of that experience that is focused on how we each have anchors in our lives that help provide us with a sense of stability and security. But during times of turbulence, we need to take them up from below the surface and pay attention to them. Otherwise, they may sink us. Otherwise, they may fail us. Otherwise, they may hold us back from surviving the turbulence. So the story had a purpose, not just to let people know what it was like living through Superstorm Sandy.
Right, exactly. And, it's interesting to think that, Sandy is something that actually affected both you and I, funny enough. But a lot of our listeners, they might have heard of it themselves, but it's a story that people can understand and learn from, regardless of if they were, in the crosshairs of it or not. And that being, the case too, I obviously had a much different experience with that than you did. I mean, for me, I was still in high school when it happened. So, I was out of school and it was a free time for me. I was having fun, but everybody has different experiences with it. Of course, there's very, very tragic things that happen too. So just a little side note there that people can be affected by it, regardless of their situation, their perspective.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, as we begin to wrap up our podcast today, I'm wondering, do you have any last insights that you'd like to share with our audience?
I'll go back to the first thing I said. You're an incredible storyteller. Take some of those stories you're telling yourself and share them with the world. And if those stories that you tell yourself are holding you back, you can change your story. And when you change your story, will change your life.
Understood. I like that a lot, and I love the way that your passion in those words. I can sense that this is something that is meaningful to you and has helped many others as well in their journey. It's good that this is a podcast because other people can hear that same passion in your words too. That being said, anybody who is inspired by you, wants to learn a little bit more, wants to stay up to date with your work, where can they find you? Where can they get in touch and read more about your accomplishments and whatnot? How can we find you?
So my website is transforminglives.coach.
Okay, perfect.
You can also find me on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, I post typically 5 times a week. I host a podcast myself. The day after we are recording this, episode 121 of my podcast comes out, or maybe it's 122. And I post those on LinkedIn. I also have a YouTube channel at Brian Gorman Maverick Coach. You can also reach me, Brian, Brian, at transforminglives.coach.
Okay, great. So to all of our listeners, we're going to put all those links in the description box of this podcast. So when we're finished, you can go ahead and click on over, check it out, stay up to date, stay in tune, get connected, all that. And so, yeah, Brian, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insights with our audience today. I mean, really, everything you've shared has been a really valuable tool for, navigating change, storytelling, helping anybody who's facing transitions of, personal or professional lives. I think, it's going to be very insightful for everybody listening today. I think we can all hold a piece of advice from this episode.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, and to everybody listening, our listeners, remember that you are the hero of your own journey as well, as we talked about today, the hero's journey. Whether you're starting a business, writing a book, making a major life transition, these principles and these practices can help you regardless of where you are in your life. It can help you navigate your path with greater awareness, better purpose. And so if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a look at some of our other episodes as well. Head on over to Brian's links on LinkedIn and transforminglives.coach. And just remember that it's important to stay ahead of the curve and keep writing, keep leading, keep inspiring. We'll see you next time on our next episode of Authors on Mission podcast. This is Danielle Hutchinson reminding you that somewhere, someone needs the book that only you can write. Visit authorsonmission.com to start your legacy. Until next time, keep leading, keep inspiring, and keep thinking in chapters. Have a great day.